You step onto a rickety boardwalk, feeling it shift ominously beneath your boots. The air is thick with a foul odour, like decaying vegetation mixed with various diseased creatures. Tendrils of mist snake across the boggy ground, clinging to gnarled roots that rise from the murky water. Ahead, a ramshackle hut borders a colossal willow, its walls patched with mismatched planks and slick with dripping moss. Each step you take feels like a concession to the swamp's lingering dread. Squinting through the hazy twilight, you try to pick out any flicker of movement along the stagnant pools. Your instincts insist that something is lurking just beyond your field of view, so you attempt to carefully scan for hidden threats. Unfortunately, the swamp's oppressive gloom and the endless drone of insects mask what slithers beyond your focus. The boardwalk groans beneath your weight, and you flinch at every echo, missing the faint ripples gliding across the murky water behind you. Unaware of the quiet menace drawing near, you press onward, senses dulled by the fog. A discordant lullaby cuts through the still air, each hollow note tangling in your gut like a slow twist of dread. You catch sight of a twisted silhouette emerging from the hut, limbs stretched thin, skin sagging and damp with algae. A rasping whisper coaxes you to come closer, its dissonant harmony tugging at your defences. Mustering your will, you attempt to block out the hag's malevolent voice, but your resolve falters. The eerie melody burrows deeper into your thoughts, leaving you stumbling forward, ensnared by her dreadful chant. Realizing the mortal danger you're in, you scramble to recall every scrap of lore you know about Green Hags, along with their curses and hexes. You concentrate on the flickering threads of magical energy that drift like toxic fumes through the stagnant air. Yet your memory betrays you at the final moment, and you fail to pierce the illusions clouding your mind. Panic and confusion fill you, and the hag's mouth twists into a grin of grim satisfaction. Your gaze darts around in search of escape, but only decaying boards and a wall of fog greet you. She extends a gnarled hand, talons clacking gently, and you can do nothing but watch as the murky darkness seems to coil tighter, seemingly sealing your fate in this forsaken marsh. Ah, thought you might have been in a spot of bother there. Worry not, for I shall fill any gaps in your knowledge on that despicable creature you are faced with. The standard Green Hag's appearance is one of a crooked crone, wrinkled and withered women of unsightly appearance, blotchy green skin blemished by warts and moles. Their limbs are lanky and uneven, bending at awkward angles that accentuate an unnatural frame. Long, stringy hair, often tangled with marshweeds or brittle twigs, hangs in wild clumps, framing a gaunt face etched with deep frown lines. A large nose and chin jut forward in crooked points, centered by a wide, sickly grin that reveals blackened and rotting teeth. Gnarled, talon-like nails extend from fingertips, easily sharp enough to rend through flesh and bone alike. Though often shrouded in ragged garments or tattered robes, the off-putting gleam in a hag's eyes betrays their seemingly frail appearance for a being steeped in dark magic, capable of terrible, evil savagery. Green hags are fey creatures of medium size, neutral evil in alignment. Their average height is 5 foot 5 inches, or 170 centimeters. They have an armor class of 17 with a hit point rating of 82. Not being particularly fast creatures, their speed comes in at a calm 30 feet per turn. What they lack in speed, however, they make up for in strength, powering in at a high 18. Their dexterity, comparatively lower at 12, suggests a creature more suited to brutish slashes than precise, well-aimed attacks. A constitution of 16 means hags are highly resilient, not to be felled in a single strike, nor taken advantage of by typical diseases or plagues. Their intelligence rates at 13, and both their wisdom and charisma stand at 14, indicating an above-average capability for trickery and deceit, a creature not to be underestimated in social situations. Green hags have dark vision up to 60 feet and a passive perception of 14, making them formidable opponents in the darkness, often aware of a foe's presence before their own is given away. They can speak in 4 or 5 languages, those being Common, Draconic, Sylvan, Giant, and some people even speak of an incredibly ancient language known only to them. Their traits include amphibious, allowing them to breathe both air and water, innate spellcasting, meaning they can cast a few spells with no requirement for material components, those being dancing lights, minor illusion, and vicious mockery. And lastly, mimicry, giving them the ability to mimic animal sounds and humanoid voices. These hags are capable of 1 of 3 actions per turn. They can use their nails for a single target claw attack, which is a melee weapon attack with a reach of 5 feet and a +6 to hit. They could use their action on illusory appearance, in which the hag covers herself with a piece of clothing enchanted with a magical illusion that makes her look like another creature of her general size with a humanoid shape. This illusion ends if the hag should die, or if they decide to use a bonus action to dispel it. Lastly, an action can be used to cast Invisible Passage, turning the hag invisible until she attacks or casts a spell, or until her concentration ends. While the hag is invisible, she leaves no physical evidence of her passage, only being tracked by certain magics. Any equipment the hag is currently wearing or carrying also shares this invisibility. Green hags, like the rest of their foul kind, are evil to the very core. They are beings that take unbridled joy in creating misery and misfortune for the virtuous and content. Their reversed sense of value extends to their physical appearance, and they relish in both their moral and physical repulsiveness, along with all the negative emotions they evoke. They go great lengths to warp and disfigure anything deemed beautiful, and are truly miserable creatures that perform acts of evil just for the sake of it. They also find great joy in sticking their noses in others' business, offering deals and bargains that force one to compromise their values or to perform acts of evil for a seemingly worthy price. Green hags, like all others, tolerate little disrespect from mortals, a trait that arises from their most glaring weakness, arrogance. Although extremely clever, their natural sense of superiority is sometimes unwarranted, their confidence leading them to reveal things they'd rather have kept secret. This variant of hags are said to be the longest living, persisting for centuries longer than most others of their kind. Some believe them to be relatives to night hags and anise hags, with there being a potential ancestral link between them, although this isn't certain. They typically make their homes in wet, temperate environments, usually gloomy and isolated regions such as dark swamps, dying forests, and misty marshes, places they could take full advantage of their twisted abilities. Their acute senses, including superior sight, smell, and hearing, along with their ability to move silently through swamp-like terrain, makes them dangerous predators even without their cunning and magic. Their lairs typically have some kind of defense mechanism in place, examples of those being a naturally dangerous path, magical wards, and powerful illusions cast on both the surrounding environment and local captured creatures. The most powerful of hags were known to have more direct control over their lairs, being able to pass through its walls entirely and magically lock or open doors and windows at will. Although hags usually shudder at the thought of sharing their homes and spells with others, some have been known to ally with other hags out of necessity, to enact a common goal or to vanquish a threat too great for the individual. These covens, often consisting of 3 different forms of hag, require the participants to suppress their instinctual selfishness and to treat each other as reluctant equals. Any grouping of hags larger than 3, the largest being 13, usually ends in catastrophe. Too many grand egos gathered together cause these larger covens to destroy themselves from the inside through incessant arguing and fighting. Great advantage awaited those few rare hags that could put their egos aside long enough to create covens. Powers far beyond that of the individual were made possible with a group. A great increase in the potency of their spells allowed for the marshalling of many diverse forces, the most powerful covens being capable of ruling entire kingdoms, whether from on or behind the throne. Other than rituals and magic focused on control, these covens may also gain the ability to scry, control the weather, command nature, create plagues, lay wicked curses, and even to divine the future or manipulate death itself. If a member of such a coven was to be killed, the surviving hags would often try to recruit replacements to keep the group together. This involved testing applicants on their capacity for malice, commanding them to enact evil acts. Though often only hags were reluctantly welcomed to a coven, in certain extremely rare circumstances, a uniquely gifted spellcaster may be invited to or allowed to compete for a spot within the coven. Typically, the 2 hags would only allow this if they had an important use in mind, such as the need for a true humanoid spy in a magical kingdom. Because hags have such negative emotions on mortals, this could be a potentially deadly arrangement and adds to the already volatile nature of a coven. Other than rare interactions with variants of their own kind, Green Hags frequently meddle with the intrigues of goblinoid warbands, manipulating the less intelligent members to gain power and control. They regularly enslave brutish trolls as a means of protection against hardier foes, and enjoy making bargains in their favour with foolish travellers that wander too close to their sodden domains. Green hags delight in enticing lizard folk with false promises of arcane gifts, twisting once simple hunts into elaborate games of subterfuge. In murky bogs, they share the gloom with flickering will-o'-wisps, forging dreadful alliances to better ensnare lost wanderers. Hags that inhabit shadowy forests enjoy quietly instigating discord among various monstrous beasts, leveraging illusions and black magic to seize control of entire swaths of land. The lesser lunar goddess Segelune, known to many as the Mother of Hags, serves as their patron deity, along with other similar fell creatures. In her natural form, Segelune appears as a 3-meter tall female humanoid with mottled yellow-brown skin, claws as hard as iron, and patches of lank, whispery hair that can be seen flaking off a balding scalp. Segelune often disguises herself to hide her horrific form, a few of her myriad disguises being a young human or elven woman, an old, homely crone, and rarely a scruffy goblinoid. The only way to properly recognize Segelune between her disguises being a small iron pot which she carries on her person at all times. Segelune is a truly wretched being, one with great sadistic desires and a deep hatred for everything in the world. Still boiling with spite over an ancient crime, this dark lunar deity is mainly driven by vindictiveness, and clings to her divinity only to enact bitter vengeance on those she believed betrayed her. Her avatars boast collections of the most dangerous qualities of ordinary hags. With their talon-like clawed nails, they have enough power to rend through flesh and muscle, and can use the spell Change Self at will. They are immune to all illusions, enchantments, poisons, and death magics, and can't be harmed without greatly enchanted magical weapons. They have resistance to acid and cold-based attacks, but are oddly vulnerable to petrification magic. They can create force cages up to 4 times each day, capable of trapping targets within range in an unbreakable cage, only escapable through teleportation or astral travel. They can also use the spell Death Gaze on a frightened creature within 30 feet twice per day, forcing a wisdom saving throw of at least 11, which, when failed, drops the target's hit points to 0. And lastly, they could use an action to let out a horrific banshee wail up to once per week. Providing they aren't within sunlight when cast, all creatures other than constructs and undead within 30 feet of the avatar, and that are capable of hearing the wail, are required to make a Constitution saving throw of 13. Failing this throw also results in the target's hit points reducing to 0, and even on a passing throw, they would take 10 psychic damage. Segelune's most treasured possession, a great iron cauldron, remains in her lair situated in the grey wastes of Hades. She would often put souls and stolen magical treasures within the cauldron to bring forth horrible, evil creations. Her avatars each carry their own smaller pots, capable of producing 1 of 4 magical effects per day, those being creating between 9 to 16 poisonous snakes, projecting a magical screen, throwing a web 18 meters in diameter, and producing a vial of strength-sapping poison with which they would coat their claws. These avatars also possessed a beaded bag containing up to 20 hag eyes. These eyes allowed sight through them from up to 10 miles away. Segelune also had a number of soul gems buried in secret places, each enchanted with powerful chain contingency spells, which would activate under certain conditions, thus making her incredibly hard to kill outright. Despite being worshipped by hags, Segelune inspires no form of love or adoration. In fact, most hags wholly despise her, offering worship only in the hope of deterring her from stealing their own stolen magical items. Apart from their worship of Segelune, many hags are known to believe in certain superstitions, the most notable of them being the Rule of Three. The Rule of Three is a planar concept rooted in the realization that many realms and layers in the multiverse are arranged in multiples of three, and hags, as well as other users of witchcraft, embrace this concept. As is said, all come in groups of three, good, bad, and strange alike. Magic returns threefold upon its source. Many spells are cast by chanting a phrase thrice, and covens require at least a trio to function. Though the oldest hags claim to have invented the Rule of Three, or at least the name and concept, the narcissistic and lying nature of these beings makes this claim seem questionable at best. Now, we've covered the Green Hag's physical appearance, their combat style and spells, along with the enchantments they cast on their wretched domains, and the grotesque deity they worship. I think you much better equipped for your altercation in the swamp. I bid thee well, adventurer, and good luck. You appear back in the swamp and tread cautiously onto the rickety boardwalk, each step echoing through the damp haze of the swamp. A stale odour of decay clings to the air, and the low-hanging fog coils around skeletal roots jutting from the water's edge. Ahead looms a dilapidated hut, sagging against a massive willow whose branches droop like skeletal arms. Despite the gloom that seems to pervade every inch of this forsaken bog, you maintain a sharp awareness, determined not to let the marsh's eerie ambience overpower your senses. A faint ripple in the inky water to your left catches your eye. Rather than brushing it off as a trick of the light, you concentrate and spot subtle movements beneath the surface. The murky silhouette shifts and disappears into the reeds. This time, you're prepared. You've succeeded in discerning that something prowls nearby. You shift your stance on the boardwalk, ensuring you won't be taken unawares by any lurking minions or hidden dangers in the swamp. A haunting lullaby begins to float through the stagnant air, each note clinging like cobwebs to your thoughts. Then you glimpse the hag herself, peering from behind the leaning doorway of her ramshackle dwelling. Her elongated limbs and pallid skin glisten with swamp filth, and she beckons you closer, voice warping from a hiss to a cloying croon. Sensing the magical undertone woven into her call, you steel your mind. This time, your willpower holds firm against her enchantment. The melody that once promised to cloud your thoughts cracks harmlessly around you, and your focus remains unbroken. With the hag's bewitching voice neutralized, you seize the moment to analyze the threads of malevolent magic that hang in the air. Drawing on your knowledge of arcane forces, you recognize the faint shimmer of illusion dancing around her form. It becomes clear that parts of her appearance are twisted or amplified through dark glamour. You quickly piece together the nature of her spellwork, identifying weak points in her sorcery that you can exploit. Armed with this insight, you stand at the ready, the boardwalk steady beneath your feet, the shadows of the swamp no longer enough to hide her secrets.